I gotta press a button. Welcome everybody to the RealAg After Show. Really appreciate you being here, and hope you're having yourself a great day, whatever you're doing. We just got off the air on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We had a great show. It's Agronomic Monday. So most weeks I am joined by Peter Wheat Johnson. We had a great discussion with him. We talked about a lot of different things. I also heard from Jeanette Gauthier at BASF talking about soybean nutrients and an inoculant strategy for Western Canada. So a lot happening. I'm in a good mood today. It's my birthday. So I'm in a good mood. Maybe it's all the sugar from the cake I had at lunch. Maybe that's what it is. But it's a good Monday around here, and hope you're having the same sort of situation. One of the things we did cover today on the show was what's happening with India and their potential to cut off wheat exports. It's the second largest producer of wheat in the world, what that would mean for the market and the supply situation with the Russia war in Ukraine happening, and the market's absolutely lit higher today. Crazy stuff. We had wheat up 70 in a number of categories. So when we look at right now, let's see here, we got Chicago wheat for September at 12.54 and a quarter. Crazy. Spring wheat September 13.78 and three quarter, up 60. So just when you think, okay, this market can't go higher, it seems to find a way to go higher. It's nuts. It's crazy. We are live, so if you have any comments, questions, or thoughts, I would love to hear from you. Just put them in the box in the live chat if you're watching on YouTube. Would really, really appreciate that. You can do the same if you are watching on Twitter. One of the things that Pete and I also talked about was the fact that the progress here on seeding and planting is relatively slow. Although in the Palliser Triangle, where seeding is pretty much complete and everyone's just looking at the sky to say, hey, when will it possibly ever rain? You look at what's happened on the eastern side of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, pretty much the entire growing area. It is a slow go. And we have moved from behind to late really quickly, like we have been talking about for the last couple of weeks. So USDA put out their crop progress report today, and let's use North Dakota as the example. So we're talking about Manitoba, of course, the state right under Manitoba. It's dealt with a lot of the same kind of heavy weather conditions. We have, as of the week ending May 15th, so yesterday, we've got corn planting at 4% of expected acres. That's compared to the 5-year average of 41%. So that just shows you how far behind we are in a crop like corn when it comes to North Dakota in that area. Let's see, on soybeans, 2% planted compared to the average of 24. So that's North Dakota numbers, but I would expect, based on what I've heard from you, Manitoba barely turned a wheel. And maybe, I heard from a grower outside of Brandon's today, maybe we'll get started here this week. So it's definitely just a lot of different tales in terms of variability across the country. Regina had a couple inches of rain on the weekend. So while it will pour, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba are proving in parts that water can fall from the sky, the Palliser Triangle still suffering from intense drought. Peter mentioned today on RealAg Radio that depending on where you are, some of the soil conditions are kind of tough. The soil is not ideal. It's just not necessarily that ideal fit soil situation. So that's something that growers are really having to also fight through. We talked a little bit about compaction today on the show as well, and how some of those in Ontario, his example was about how some of the issues from last fall, because remember we had all that rain in parts of southwestern Ontario, that wet weather has carried over from a compaction standpoint, and growers are still facing some of those challenges. So we talked about how, look at Manitoba and eastern Saskatchewan right now, very, very wet. People feel behind. The calendar continues to tick away every single day. And we're moving into that situation. We are going to see possibly some crop changes if we can't get really, really rolling here fairly soon. But if we rush it, do we create compaction challenges for ourselves down the road? And if we do, how do we fix that? And how do we balance all this? Because realistically, you can't wait till that perfect situation based on the amount of crop we have to put in. It's a good thing that we are able to put a lot of acres in relatively fast when we can get going, but still some real considerations for a lot of growers as we're already at the middle of May 16th. I just can't believe how things are moving so fast. I dangerously brought up the topic today on the show of tires versus tracks, and Pete made an interesting comment that tires are trying to be more like tracks, and tracks are trying to be a little bit more like tires. And for a lot of growers, I think there's some personal preference here. What is the best fit for you? Some of the larger farms probably have both options available to them on their four-wheel drives, but there's always a lot of passion that comes out of this tires versus tracks, tracks versus tires debate when it comes to compaction. Jeanette Gauthier on the show talked about you really have one shot to get it right. And I think that's a really applicable quote to some of the stresses of this year, especially when we're dealing with, the market is moving to new highs. So we know there's an opportunity given the fact that even with inputs going up and rising, the grower has an opportunity to make some money this year, provided they have the adequate moisture. In some cases, too much moisture. What I've heard several Thursdays is farmers are just trying to figure out how to get to average. If they hit a home run on yield, fantastic, but are just trying to get to average. And that stress of you get one shot to get it right creates an added level of complexity and decision making as, if you're in Manitoba looking, okay, when should I go? Do I want to push it? Do I want to wait a little bit longer? And there's probably some areas where it's like, well, there's no chance I can go until this calendar flips to June. And in some cases, there's going to be that, field by field sort of decision making that's going to happen. And it puts a lot of pressure on your logistical plan. Because if you think back 2-3 months, nobody was hoping for this much moisture in Manitoba. Nobody was. We wanted some moisture. We just didn't want this much moisture. And of course, we over-delivered. And this is where an example where averages in terms of precipitation are dangerous, because you may look at the precipitation, the average precipitation across the 3 prairie provinces, and you may say, and I haven't looked what the average is, but if you summed it all up, it may look quite normal, because we've got an excessive amount of Manitoba. We've got nothing in the western prairies, at least the southwestern prairies. And that average kind of works out. And we know that timing's important, and where it falls is quite important. So I think for some farms that are dealing with these heavy moisture situations, this is where the logistics of your farm really get tested. This is where you had a plan on how you're going to put the crop in based on what was in front of you, and now you're having to go to plan B and C in terms of how you are going to do this. When you can go, you can get it in as efficiently and productively as possible. So that's always one of the things that Mother Nature really threw us for a bit of a loop here in some of these areas. So I think that, like I said, I think the market has also added. There's if you can get a crop, there is real money to be made here in 2022. Got a comment here from Canadian Cowman, who is out in British Columbia. Says, still cool and wet in the Fraser Valley. Hard pressed to find 36 hours dry enough to cut. Grass silage losing quality quickly as it matures. So there you go. Moisture falling in the Fraser Valley. Highly productive area of Western Canada. It's sometimes, I say this in the nicest way, it's sometimes forgot when we talk about agriculture, but it's a highly productive area, very expensive land, and Mother Nature's not cooperating out there as well as she could be either. So hopefully everything straightens out for you, Canadian Cowman. I know you get like 5-6 cuts of alfalfa. So this weather early on is not great news for sure, because that's one of the areas too that faced all that flooding and feed shortages and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully things straighten out there very, very soon. Oh, great. There's an update. I'm trying to be optimistic, and he says 2-week forecast doesn't look very promising either. Well, I know how you feel. We're on the other end of that, because here it doesn't, when I say you could apply that, statement. The 2-week forecast doesn't look promising to a major swath of acres, for sure in Western Canada. I think in Eastern Canada, the forecast looks a little bit better. I didn't look at it this morning, but I think in Eastern Canada, it looks a little bit better from a temperature standpoint. But here out west, boy, I'll tell you what, it's a mixed bag for sure. Yeah. Tough stuff. Let me know how your conditions are and how you're making out. You can definitely comment in the box, whether you're watching on Twitter or YouTube. Some of the other things that Pete and I covered was the quality of the winter wheat in Ontario. He mentioned that it survived winter better than he kind of expected to. I gave him here's another, to give you an idea here. Hold on. We got the winter wheat, the U.S. winter wheat number. Where is it here? So winter wheat conditions for, as of the end of the week, May 15th. So as of yesterday, okay, for the week ending yesterday, we've got across 18 states, we have 41% at very poor or poor, and only 3% excellent. Okay, so 32 is fair, 24% is good, and only 3% is excellent. While 41% is very poor to poor. This is another added factor into why this market on wheat is strong. I got people calling me, and I got cheapers. Okay, Peter Johnson, who's watching, says, do you believe the weather prognosticators, Kevin? Here in Ontario Ag, they are rarely that accurate. Well, you know what? It would be easier, Pete, for the weather forecasters to be accurate if Mother Nature would be a little bit more predictable, right? It is kind of amazing with all the science and all the data we have now. That's a bit of a... It showcases how difficult it is to predict the weather with all of today's technology and all of the quantitative tools that are out there, and we still can't forecast to a T. It is kind of amazing. And you think about how it was like 40, 50 years ago, you could see why they weren't very accurate. That makes a lot more sense. But in today's world, is it just getting harder to predict? Are we still refining the predictive models that people are using? What is it? Because you're kind of right. It does feel at times. Now, we also don't give them credit when things are actually right. Where it's like we only look at it and we're like, well, we were supposed to get a bunch of rain, didn't get it. But we're never like, hey, they predicted 28 Celsius and it was 29. Geez, they were pretty right about today. We never have that conversation. We only have, it's sort of like the rain 90 days after a fog thing, right? We only talk about it when it actually does, luckily, by chance happen. We never, ever talk about it when it doesn't happen, which is probably 99% of the time. Ken says the nutrient forecast has been incredibly accurate all spring, which is a disappointment. Ken, yeah, I know. Eric Snodgrass does a great job. I really enjoy interviewing him and having him on the show. He is, that's cool that you've noticed that he has been accurate. So, Pete says, it's like farming. We don't yet understand the biological system that well yet. Same with the weather. Yeah, that's actually a good point, Pete, right? Like we're always learning and trying to improve with increased knowledge. comes maybe sometimes more questions than answers. I'm also kind of amazed sometimes when we use these new fancy words. Like, this is 2 years in a row we've heard the word derecho when it comes to high winds. I don't remember that one. Atmospheric river. Although I did have a meteorologist tell me that is a common term. Just it wasn't necessarily put out in the media before. But yeah. So we need some sunshine and some wind in the eastern prairies, and the southwestern prairies really, really need a sprinkle. Like, I really need a sprinkle, like badly. Like, it's pretty tough. It's there's a lot of farmers out this way thinking about farming for crop insurance, for sure. Compaction is the least of their concerns and their issues. It's just trying to get the crop out of the ground. I should mention that tonight on the Agronomists, we've got Peter W.P. Johnson, the man, the myth, the legend himself. He will be joined by, well, of course, host Lindsay Smith will be there. She's going to try to keep these characters in line. We got Peter Johnson, and we've got Warren Ward, who is with the Canola Council of Canada. So we've got good representation on both sides of the country. It's right here on YouTube and Twitter, so same place. 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. They're going to be talking about starter fertility, early season fertility. I know that the conversation will also expand a little bit. It's really kind of all that stuff early on in the growing season here. So I'm looking forward to watching tonight. And, of course, if you are a CCA, you can get CCA CU credits for participating in the program. And just a bit of a heads up, a bit of a spoiler alert. There is no show next week, so you better get your fill of the agronomists here tonight. It's just, we were talking about the weather, and Ken had mentioned that the nutrient forecast has been incredibly accurate. Are you one of those people? Because I do this. Like, there's a couple. I have about like three different weather apps on my phone, and if I don't like the forecast on the one, I go to the other and try to see if it's better, because that's the one I'm going to lean on. And it's usually to look at how strong the wind's going to be blowing here. But yeah, that's how we talk about the forecast here, is how hard is the wind blowing as opposed to temperature. Pete says, so Shaun, when do I sell my wheat, now or will it go higher yet? Got to hit the bottom because I need to balance out my $8 sales. Yeah, we were talking about the price of wheat, and Pete, I always appreciate Pete's honesty, and he talked about how he sold wheat significantly lower than it is today, but at the time it was the right decision. This is one of the reasons why, if you have old crop and you still haven't sold it, you are disciplined. But on the new crop, as I've talked to a lot of producers on the Farmer Rapid Fire, I continue to hear that I get, to sum it up, it's in really tight hands. Now, there are areas where people are a little bit leery to market crop in the dry areas because they got stung last year on the marketing contracts, okay? But if you're in a region where you have moisture and you have an expectation of some type of crop, okay, it may be below average, but maybe it could be average, and wow, if it's above average. And we don't know at this point, let's be honest. We're early days. We're just starting to get seed in the ground. We're just getting started. But for those of you that are making this decision, it is really in tough hands, or tight hands, I should say, not tough hands. Well, your hands are tough, but they're also tight. And it's not because you don't want to spend money tight. It's because you're holding on to that inventory. It's going to take some real higher prices to bust it loose. And why is that? Because the market has shown us it continues to go higher. Now, does it go higher from here? Who knows? Does India, in this case, this news cycle where it's being driven by India and what they will or will not export in terms of wheat, they could change their mind, and then the market goes lower. It's the same as we've talked about with when the war in Ukraine first started, and that was really, really fresh. How long does this conflict last? Because that could have an impact on how long this market stays at these levels. Well, now we've added India on top of it. I wonder how many other countries we're going to see make this same sort of decision. And I'm reminded of a conversation that was on AgriTalk when I was on there on Friday about how price controls, when a government tries to control the price, and we were talking about capping fuel prices, but just in general, we have learned that when we do this kind of stuff, there's unintended consequences. And so we're kind of in this sort of mode right now where the Canadian government and other governments, India showing its, what it's doing under Modi, we're showcasing we haven't learned from history. And we're in this sort of mode now where governments are going to solve the problem, and they're going to protect their citizens from some of the dangers that are out there. And the market knows differently. And this is pretty very, very concerning times, because do some of these moves by these governments on restricting exports to make sure their people are fed, does it create the opposite situation? And that's a big debate that's happening out there right now. Canadian Cowman says, grain goes up anymore. Expect another milk price increase announcement sooner or later. My dairy grain ration had a 10% increase last month. That is obviously something. And add on top of it, I think if you think about what's happened with avian influenza and some of the pressures there on our poultry sector, we're bound to see some price increases there as well. Peter Johnson says, food riots in Sri Lanka started due to the government shift to no chemical fertilizer pesticides. Poor countries cannot afford these prices. Pete, I 100% agree. Another example of where government knows best and tries to make these decisions, and the result is a consequence that they made it worse, is basically the way I would describe that. Ken says, you need more grain marketing segments on RealAg. They seem to be on less of late. A regular weekly segment would be ideal. I appreciate that. I'm never really sure how much to have marketing segments. I can tell you this. Wednesday, I've got John Drager from Left Field Commodity Research will be on. We're going to talk about this wheat market and some of the other crops. So yeah, maybe weekly. I appreciate your advice there, because I always struggle, because I love talking markets, but I'm never sure how much to talk about it on the show. So I appreciate the kick in the butt, and I can tell you that we do have John Drager booked for Wednesday. So this has been awesome, you guys. You've had lots of great. I really, really appreciate you participating. I love doing these after shows. As Pete sort of told the whole world, it's my birthday today, and I am going golfing with my oldest son, and our tee time is in 40 minutes. So I have to run, because I can't be late for my birthday golf. So, hey, appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Pete needs help. He doesn't, Pete, you know what, Ken? A no truer statement has ever been told right there. Pete needs the help. Yes, he does. I really appreciate everybody tuning in to RealAg Radio. If you missed the live show, if you don't have Sirius, don't worry. You can get the podcast, and there's lots of ways to consume the show. And tomorrow on the after show, it's going to be Kara Oosterhouse with me. She's been out doing some crop schools. We'll get her thoughts on some of the things that she's seeing, and I think we're going to do it out. She's going to be out and about, so from the field. So that'll be kind of fun. Really appreciate everybody being such a supporter of real agriculture and everything that we do. We love bringing you the content, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.